Alejandro stood at the altar, surrounded by the opulence of the grand ballroom. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting a warm glow that reflected off the polished marble floor. Rows of elegantly dressed guests filled the pews, their murmurs of excitement creating a palpable buzz in the air. Yet despite the picturesque scene unfolding before him, Alejandro felt an unsettling dread gnawing at his insides. His gaze drifted to Laura, standing at the opposite end, resplendent in her white wedding dress. It hugged her figure perfectly, accentuating the beauty that had drawn him to her in the first place. Her dark hair cascaded in soft waves around her shoulders, and her radiant smile lit up the room. But as he looked into her eyes, which sparkled with joy and anticipation, a wave of panic washed over him. "What am I doing?" he thought, his heart racing. The weight of the moment pressed down on him, and he could feel the stares of the guests piercing through his facade. The flowers, the music, the laughter, all of it felt like a grand performance, and he was but an actor, failing to remember his lines. Taking a deep breath, Alejandro stepped away from the altar, excusing himself from the gathering. The murmurs intensified behind him, but he didn't care. He needed air, needed clarity, and above all he needed to understand why he felt this overwhelming sense of dread. He found a quiet corner of the ballroom, leaning against the cool wall, his mind racing. "Is this really what I want?" he whispered to himself, the question echoing in the empty space around him. "Am I ready for this?" Moments passed, but it felt like an eternity. Just as he was about to return, he caught a glimpse of Laura's reflection in a nearby mirror. She was laughing with a group of bridesmaids, her eyes sparkling with joy. The sight momentarily warmed his heart, but it was quickly overshadowed by a surge of doubt. His mind drifted to the life he envisioned without her, one filled with endless opportunities, unencumbered by the responsibilities of marriage and family. Yet the thought of leaving her behind felt like a punch to the gut. Maybe this isn't the end, he contemplated, but the thought was quickly dismissed. He couldn't shake the feeling of being trapped in a life he hadn't chosen for himself. He couldn't do this. Not today, not ever. As he turned back toward the altar, he felt a sudden resolve. He had to tell her, to be honest about his fears. He spotted Laura, and with his heart pounding made his way through the throngs of guests, finally reaching her side. She looked up, her eyes widening with surprise and concern. "Alejandro, where did you go? Everyone's waiting," she exclaimed, a hint of worry lacing her voice. "I know, Laura. I need to talk to you. Can we step outside for a moment?" His voice faltered, but the urgency in his tone was undeniable. "Is something wrong?" she asked, her brow furrowing as she glanced back at the guests. "We can't just—" "Please," he interrupted, desperation creeping into his words. "It's important." Reluctantly, she nodded and allowed him to guide her away from the crowd. They stepped into a secluded garden, the fragrant scent of blooming flowers surrounding them. The tranquility of the space contrasted starkly with the storm brewing within Alejandro. Once they were alone, he faced her, his heart racing. "Laura, I'm not sure I'm ready for this, for marriage, for the life we've planned." Her expression shifted from confusion to hurt, and he could see the pain in her eyes. "Alejandro, what do you mean? We've talked about this for months. You can't just—" "I know, but I've been thinking and I can't help but feel trapped. I want to explore the world, to chase my dreams without the constraints of a family. It's not fair to you if I'm not fully committed," he confessed, his voice trembling. "Trapped?" she echoed, the hurt evident in her tone. "You're saying this now, just before we're supposed to be married? You're breaking my heart. I don't want to hurt you, Laura. I need to be honest. I think it's best if we don't go through with this," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Tears welled in her eyes, and she shook her head in disbelief. "You can't be serious. We love each other. We've built a life together. You're throwing it all away for what, a whim?" "It's not a whim," he replied, frustration creeping into his voice. "It's about my future, about what I truly want. This isn't the life I envisioned for myself." Laura took a step back, her expression a mix of disbelief and anguish. "So what? You think you can just walk away from everything? From me?" The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of their shared history. Alejandro felt his resolve falter as he watched her struggle to hold back tears. I think it's for the best, he managed, though inside he felt like he was shattering her heart into a million pieces. You're making a terrible mistake, she whispered, the pain in her voice cutting through him like a knife. You'll regret this. I might, he admitted, but I have to do what feels right for me right now. As the silence stretched between them, Alejandro could see the walls she was building around her heart. She took a shaky breath, and he felt the distance between them grow. If this is what you really want, then I can't stop you. But know this. I will never forgive you for this, she said, her voice trembling with hurt. With that, she turned away, tears streaming down her cheeks, and Alejandro felt as though the ground beneath him had vanished. He wanted to reach out, to pull her back and tell her he loved her, that he would change, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, he watched her walk away, a part of him crumbling with each step she took. In the days that followed, Alejandro poured himself into his work, determined to fill the void left by his impulsive decision. He attended meetings, closed deals, and schmoozed with influential people. But no matter how successful he became, the regret lingered like a shadow. He tried to convince himself that success would bring him happiness, but no amount of wealth could replace the love he had lost. Late at night, in the solitude of his lavish apartment, he would find himself staring at a framed picture of him and Laura, captured moments of laughter and love, forever frozen in time. He would trace her face with his finger, a pang of nostalgia hitting him hard. What have I done? He would whisper to the empty room. But deep down, he knew that it was too late to turn back now. Alejandro sat in the corner of a lavish conference room, staring blankly across the polished mahogany table at the sea of suits. The walls were adorned with contemporary art, and the chandelier above sparkled with opulence, yet he felt a heavy emptiness inside. The meeting was about securing a new partnership with a tech giant, a potential deal that could skyrocket his company's visibility, yet his mind was elsewhere. He couldn't shake the image of Laura from his thoughts, her radiant smile and the way her laughter used to fill the spaces in his life that now felt achingly hollow. Mr. Gonzalez, a voice cut through his reverie, and Alejandro blinked, suddenly aware of the eyes upon him. The lead investor was leaning forward, a hint of impatience in his expression. Do you see potential in this collaboration? Absolutely, Alejandro replied, his voice steady, though his heart raced. He forced a smile, trying to mask the turmoil swirling within him. Our brands align perfectly. We can leverage their technology to enhance our services. He spoke with practiced confidence, but each word felt like an echo of a life he had chosen over the one he had lost. As the meeting progressed, Alejandro participated half-heartedly, nodding and occasionally adding input, but his thoughts drifted back to their last encounter. The pain in Laura's eyes haunted him, and the more he tried to push it away, the more it clawed at him. After the meeting, he excused himself from the celebratory lunch, opting instead to retreat to his office. The sleek lines of his workspace, glass walls, minimalist furniture, and a breathtaking view of the city skyline should have inspired him, yet he felt suffocated by it all. He sank into his chair, picking up a framed photograph of him and Laura that sat on his desk. They looked so happy, arms wrapped around each other, faces glowing with love. He traced the outline of her face with his finger, a wave of nostalgia washing over him. "Why did I let you go?" he murmured to the empty room, his voice barely above a whisper. The silence that followed was deafening, amplifying his regret. He had traded love for ambition, convinced that the thrill of success would fill the void. But now he realized that no amount of money, fame, or luxury could replace the warmth of her presence. Days turned into weeks, and Alejandro threw himself into his work with relentless fervor. He attended high-profile parties, mingling with celebrities and socialites, yet each encounter only deepened his sense of isolation. One evening, at a gala hosted by a prominent philanthropist, Alejandro stood amidst a crowd of glistening gowns and tailored suits, the air thick with laughter and clinking glasses. A stunning blonde approached him, her eyes sparkling with interest. "Hi there, I'm Isabella," she said, her voice smooth and inviting. "I couldn't help but notice you from across the room." You're Alejandro Gonzalez, right? The CEO of ACG Innovations? Yes, that's me, he replied, forcing a smile as he scanned the room. He felt a flicker of interest but quickly dismissed it. The chatter around them faded into a dull hum as Isabella leaned closer, her perfume intoxicating. I've heard so much about you, she continued, her gaze lingering on him. You're quite the catch. Thanks, he said, feeling a twinge of discomfort. As she flirted, a part of him wanted to engage, to enjoy the attention, but another part of him just longed for Laura. No matter how charming Isabella was, she couldn't compare. He felt like a ghost in this vibrant world, a man trapped between the allure of success and the haunting memory of a love lost. Can I get you a drink? Isabella asked, her tone playful. Water would be great, he replied, trying to maintain a polite demeanor. As she walked away, Alejandro's gaze drifted to the dance floor. Couples twirled gracefully, laughter punctuating the air, and he felt a pang of loneliness that cut deeper than before. Returning to his office that night, Alejandro plopped down on his leather chair, exhaustion washing over him. He reached for the framed photograph again, the image of happier times feeling like a cruel reminder of what he had lost. What do I do now, Laura? He whispered to the silent room. He brushed a hand across his face, feeling the weight of his choices pressing down on him. The months passed in a blur of meetings, galas, and networking events, but the emptiness remained. Alejandro tried to fill his schedule to avoid confronting his feelings, yet he found himself staring blankly at his computer screen more often than not. Every success felt hollow, every new deal a fleeting distraction from the truth he couldn't escape. One night, after a particularly glamorous event, he returned home late, the city lights twinkling like stars outside his penthouse window. He poured himself a glass of whiskey, the amber liquid swirling in the glass reflecting the chaos in his mind. He sank onto the sofa, staring at the skyline, lost in thought. The world outside seemed alive, vibrant, while he felt like a ghost haunting his own life. As he sipped the whiskey, his phone buzzed on the table, breaking the silence. It was a message from his assistant, reminding him of an upcoming charity event. He groaned, the thought of attending yet another social gathering filling him with dread. But deep down, he knew he couldn't hide forever. Maybe this event would be different, a chance to connect with people who truly valued more than just his wealth. The night of the charity gala arrived, and Alejandro donned a tailored suit, the fabric hugging his frame as he prepared for another evening of forced smiles and small talk. He arrived at the venue, a grand ballroom adorned with twinkling lights and elegant decorations. The atmosphere buzzed with excitement and philanthropy, yet Alejandro felt detached as he moved through the crowd, exchanging pleasantries with fellow attendees. As the night wore on, he found himself standing by a window, looking out at the city below when he noticed a commotion on the other side of the room. A trio of young children burst into the ballroom, their laughter ringing like music. They were joyfully chasing each other, their little faces lit up with delight. Alejandro's heart skipped a beat when he recognized one of the children, an unmistakable curl of dark hair and bright eyes that mirrored Laura's. He squinted, his breath catching as he took a step closer. The children were playing near a woman who was clearly their mother, and as she turned to them, Alejandro's heart raced. It was Laura. His pulse quickened, a mix of disbelief and emotions flooding over him. He hadn't seen her since that fateful day, and the sight of her, now a mother, took his breath away. Laura, he whispered, the name escaping his lips as if it were a prayer. She looked radiant, her hair cascading over her shoulders, her smile warm and inviting as she knelt down to catch one of the triplets who had stumbled. The moment was surreal, and Alejandro felt a whirlwind of emotions crashing over him: joy, longing, regret. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for the confrontation he never thought he'd have to face. As he approached, the laughter of the children faded into the background, replaced by the rapid beating of his heart. Laura looked up, her expression shifting from surprise to uncertainty. "Alejandro," she said, her voice a mixture of shock and guardedness. The air between them crackled with unspoken words, and he felt the weight of their shared history hanging over them. "Hey, Laura," he managed to say, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's been a while." "Yeah, it has," she replied, crossing her arms defensively. The moment felt heavy, filled with the memories of their past and the uncertainty of their present. Before he could gather his thoughts, one of the triplets, a little girl with dark curls and big brown eyes, ran up to Laura, tugging at her skirt. "Mummy, can we go play?" she asked, her voice sweet and innocent. "Of course, sweetie," Laura said, kneeling to give her daughter a kiss on the forehead before looking back at Alejandro. "This is my daughter, Sophia," she added, her voice softening slightly. "Hi, Sophia," Alejandro said, crouching down to meet the girl's gaze. "You're very beautiful." Sophia beamed at the compliment, her innocence cutting through the tension between Alejandro and Laura. "Thank you. Do you want to play with us?" she asked, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Alejandro's heart swelled at the invitation, a bittersweet ache washing over him. "I would love to, but I think I should talk to your mum first," he replied gently, looking back at Laura, who was watching him with cautious curiosity. "Well, we'll be over there," Laura said, gesturing toward a quieter corner of the room, her voice steady yet uncertain. With that, she took Sophia's hand and led the triplets away, leaving Alejandro standing alone, a mix of anticipation and dread swirling within him. As he watched them play, he couldn't help but wonder about the lives they had built without him. So much time had passed, and yet the connection he felt with Laura was still there, like a thread woven into the fabric of his heart. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for the conversation that awaited them, hoping for a chance to understand the life she had created and the love he had lost. Alejandro stood at the lavish charity event, surrounded by the elite of the city, but his mind was elsewhere. He had tried to immerse himself in his work and the glitzy lifestyle that came with it, but the emptiness within him was palpable. The laughter and chatter of the guests felt distant, like an echo of a life that wasn't truly his anymore. He sipped a glass of champagne, the bubbles fizzing faintly as he scanned the room, hoping to find some distraction from the gnawing sense of regret that had become a constant companion. As he moved through the crowd, a playful shriek caught his attention. He turned and his heart nearly stopped. A trio of children, all around 3 years old, were running in circles, their laughter bright and innocent. Alejandro's breath caught in his throat when he recognized the woman standing nearby, watching them with a smile that was both familiar and foreign. It was Laura. She looked radiant, her hair cascading down her shoulders, and her eyes sparkled with a joy that seemed to light up the entire room. But something was different. She was no longer just the woman he loved. She was a mother. His feet felt heavy as he approached, each step laden with the weight of memories and choices he could not undo. Laura caught sight of him, her smile faltering for just a moment before she regained her composure. The triplets, oblivious to the history that stood between their parents, continued to play, weaving in and out of the legs of their mother. Alejandro's heart swelled with a mix of emotions, longing, regret, and a deep-seated ache for the life they could have had together. "Laura," he finally managed to say, his voice barely above a whisper. "Alejandro," she replied, her tone guarded yet soft. She glanced down at the children, who had paused their game to look at him with innocent curiosity. "These are my children, Sophia, Mateo, and Lucas." She gestured to each one, pride evident in her voice. "Triplets," he breathed, a smile creeping onto his face despite the turmoil inside him. "They're beautiful." "Thank you," Laura said, her eyes meeting his with a mixture of warmth and caution. "It's been a journey, to say the least." Alejandro nodded, unable to find the right words amidst the emotions swirling within him. The children, with their bright eyes and infectious laughter, were a reminder of everything he had walked away from. I didn't know," he finally managed to say, his voice thick with emotion. "How have you been?" "I've been good," Laura replied, her gaze unwavering. "It's been a lot of work, but I wouldn't trade it for anything." She looked down at the triplets, who had begun to chase each other again. "They keep me busy." "They're lucky to have you," he said, his heart aching at the thought of all the moments he had missed, the first steps, the first words, the simple everyday joys of parenthood. "I can only imagine how challenging it must be." "It is," Laura admitted, her expression softening, but it's also incredibly rewarding. They bring so much joy into my life." Her voice trailed off as she looked away, the moment of vulnerability quickly overshadowed by the weight of their past. Alejandro took a deep breath, steeling himself for what he needed to say. "I'm sorry, Laura, for everything. I never should have walked away. I thought I needed to find myself, but all I found was emptiness." Her eyes narrowed slightly, and he could see the walls she had built around her heart. "You made your choice, Alejandro. You can't just come back and expect things to be the same." "I know," he said, desperation creeping into his voice. "I don't want to erase the past, I just want to understand it. I want to know you and the kids. I want to be part of your lives." Laura's expression softened momentarily, but then she shook her head. "It's not that simple. I've built a life here, and they're my priority now. I can't just invite you back in without knowing if you'll stay this time." The words stung, but Alejandro understood. He had hurt her deeply, and he could see the pain still etched in her features. "I don't want to disrupt your life, Laura. I want a chance to show you that I've changed, that I'm ready to be there, not just for you, but for them too." At the mention of the triplets, Laura's expression hardened again. They don't need a father who walks away at the first sign of trouble. They need stability. They need someone who can commit. "I want to be that person," he insisted, his heart racing. "I've realized that success means nothing without the people you love. I've spent months chasing shadows, and all I want now is to be part of your world." She regarded him carefully, as if weighing his words against the backdrop of their shared history. "You say that now, but what happens when the thrill of being back in my life fades? What happens when the reality of parenthood sets in?" Alejandro felt a lump in his throat. "I can't promise perfection, but I can promise my commitment. I'm ready to face whatever challenges come our way. I want to be there for you and the kids." Laura looked away, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "It's not just about you, Alejandro. I've made sacrifices, and I've learned to stand on my own. I can't go back to being dependent on someone who might leave again. I don't want you to be dependent on me. I want to support you, to be a partner in this journey," he said, his voice earnest. "I want to be a father to them. I want to be part of your lives, not as an obligation, but because I care." The triplets, oblivious to the tension, continued to play, their laughter a stark contrast to the heaviness of the conversation. Alejandro watched them, his heart aching at the thought of the life he had tossed away. "They deserve to know their father," he added softly. Laura's gaze flickered back to him, her expression a mixture of hope and fear. "It's not just about you showing up, Alejandro. It's about proving you're here to stay. I'm willing to do whatever it takes," he said, his heart racing with a determination he had never felt before. "I'll show you. I'll show them." For a moment, there was silence between them, a fragile truce built on unspoken hope and lingering pain. Alejandro could see the flicker of possibility in her eyes, but he also sensed the hesitation that lay beneath. He had a long road ahead of him, one filled with the uncertainty of rebuilding trust and the challenge of proving he was worthy of a second chance. "Let's take it slow," Laura finally said, her voice steady but cautious. "We can't rush this. I need to see that you're serious. The kids need stability, and I can't put them through any more upheaval." "Of course," Alejandro agreed, relief flooding through him. "I'm willing to do whatever it takes, however long it takes." As they spoke, the triplets returned, tugging at Laura's skirt, eager for attention. Alejandro watched them, his heart swelling with a mix of pride and longing. He wanted to be part of their lives, and for the first time, he felt a glimmer of hope that perhaps redemption was within reach. "Okay, little ones, let's show your dad the art of the epic playground race," Laura announced, her smile returning as she knelt down to their level. The triplets cheered, and Alejandro felt a warmth spread through him at the sight of their joy. As he joined the family in their playful antics, Alejandro knew that the journey ahead would be challenging. But for the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of purpose. He was ready to embrace the uncertainty, ready to fight for the life he had once taken for granted. With each laugh and each moment shared with Laura and their children, he felt the pieces of his heart slowly mending, hopeful that love could lead him back to the family he had lost. As Alejandro drove through the city, the neon lights reflecting off the sleek black exterior of his car, He couldn't shake the heaviness that had settled in his chest. The charity event had been a whirlwind of glitz and glamour, but all he could think about was the unexpected sight of Laura, vibrant and radiant, surrounded by her triplets. Memories of their time together surged through his mind, each one tinged with a bittersweet regret that felt like an anchor pulling him down. He turned the radio down, the music fading into the background as he navigated through the bustling streets. The laughter of children echoed in his thoughts, and he recalled the way Laura's face lit up when she spoke about her children. "They're my world," she had said, pride swelling in her voice. Alejandro felt a pang in his heart, realizing he had missed so much. He had chosen ambition over love, convinced that the high life would fulfill him. Yet here he was, alone in his car, plagued by the choices he had made. "Why did I let her go?" he muttered to himself, gripping the steering wheel tighter. The city lights blurred as he blinked back the unexpected tears that threatened to spill. "I thought I'd find happiness in success, but all I feel is emptiness." He closed his eyes for a moment, trying to steady his racing thoughts. Each memory of Laura felt like a reminder of what he had lost. Her laughter, her warmth, the way her eyes sparkled when she talked about the future they had planned together. As he pulled into his driveway, Alejandro took a deep breath, the weight of his thoughts still heavy on his shoulders. He stepped out of the car, the cool night air brushing against his skin, but it did little to clear the fog of regret clouding his mind. He walked into his home, a sprawling mansion filled with the trappings of wealth, yet it felt more like a museum than a home. The silence echoed around him, amplifying his loneliness. He paced around the spacious living room, glancing at the lavish decor that had once impressed him. Now it felt hollow. He picked up a framed photo from the coffee table, one of their trips together, Laura laughing as they strolled along a picturesque beach. Her carefree spirit had always drawn him in, and it had been a long time since he had felt that kind of joy. "What have I done?" he whispered to the empty room, the question hanging in the air like a specter. Just then his phone buzzed, breaking the silence. It was a message from his best friend Marco checking in. Alejandro hesitated before typing back. "Hey, just got back from that charity event. It was interesting." He leaned against the counter, the cool marble a stark contrast to the warmth of the memories flooding his mind. "What do you mean by interesting?" Marco replied almost instantly. "Did you run into anyone special?" Alejandro's heart raced. Should he tell Marco about Laura? About the triplets? He took a deep breath, fingers hovering over the screen. "Actually, I saw Laura there," he typed, his heart pounding at the admission. "She has kids now." The reply came quickly. "No way. How did that go? You should reach out to her." "Yeah, right," Alejandro scoffed, shaking his head. "What would I even say? Hey, remember me? The guy who left you at the altar?" "Dude, you can't keep running away from this," Marco replied. "So you need to talk to her, apologize, you owe her that much." Alejandro sank onto the plush sofa, his mind racing. The thought of reaching out terrified him. What if she had moved on completely? What if she didn't want to hear from him? But a part of him knew he couldn't ignore the feeling that had taken root in his heart. The longing to reconnect, to understand her life as a mother, was becoming insatiable. "I don't know, Marco," he typed back slowly. "What if she doesn't want to see me? I hurt her so badly." "Maybe, but you won't know until you try. You can't keep living in regret, man. You need to face this." Alejandro stared at his phone, the weight of Marco's words resonating in his mind. He stood up abruptly, pacing the room again. He wanted to reach out, to apologize, to find a way back into Laura's life, not just for himself, but for the children as well. He imagined what it would be like to be a part of their lives, to see Laura again, to feel her warmth, but fear tugged at him, a reminder of the pain he had caused. With a deep breath, Alejandro walked to his desk and opened his laptop. The screen lit up, illuminating his face in the dim light of the room. He hesitated for a moment, then opened a new message. The cursor blinked at him, waiting for words that felt agonizingly difficult to find. What would he say? How could he convey the depth of his regret and desire to reconnect without sounding like a desperate fool? "Hey, Laura," he began, the words flowing slowly as he typed. "I hope this message finds you well. I know it's been a long time since we last spoke, and I've thought about reaching out many times. Seeing you today brought back so many memories, and I couldn't help but feel a wave of regret for how I left things between us." He paused, his heart racing, the weight of his emotions pressing down on him. "I can't express how sorry I am for my impulsive decision. I thought I could find happiness without you, but I realize now how wrong I was. I've missed you. I've missed us." Alejandro's fingers hovered over the keyboard as he struggled to find the right words. "I understand if you're happy and don't want to hear from me, but I would love the chance to talk, to understand your life now, if you're open to it." He took a deep breath, his heart pounding as he stared at the screen. Was this too much? Would she even want to respond? With a final surge of courage, he hit send, a mixture of hope and anxiety flooding through him. As the message disappeared into the digital ether, he felt both liberated and terrified. He walked away from the desk, the silence of the house enveloping him once more. For the first time in months, he felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps this was the first step toward redemption, a chance to reconnect with the woman he had loved and lost. Now all he could do was wait, his heart racing with anticipation and uncertainty about what the future might hold. Alejandro sat at a small table in the corner of the cafe, his heart racing as he waited for Laura to arrive. The warm aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, but he barely noticed. His mind was consumed with thoughts of their last encounter, the pain etched on Laura's face, and the regret that had become a constant companion since their breakup. He had replayed that day countless times, wishing he could take back the impulsive decision that had shattered their lives. He glanced at his watch, anxiety gnawing at him. What would he even say? Would she still feel the same way about him? The questions swirled in his mind like a storm, and he fought to push them aside. His phone buzzed on the table, jolting him from his thoughts. It was a message from Laura. "I'm on my way." He took a deep breath, trying to calm the tumult within him. The cafe was bustling with life. Laughter echoed around him as friends met over steaming cups. But he felt isolated in his bubble of uncertainty. He fiddled with the napkin holder, glancing toward the door every few moments, his heart leaping each time it swung open. Finally, he saw her. Laura walked in, her hair cascading in soft waves around her shoulders, wearing a simple yet elegant dress that accentuated her natural beauty. She scanned the room, and their eyes met. For a brief moment, time stood still, and he saw a flicker of recognition in her gaze. But as she approached, the warmth of that moment vanished, replaced by a guarded expression. "Hi, Alejandro," she said, her voice steady but cool. She sat down across from him, her posture slightly tense. "Hi, Laura," he replied, struggling to find his voice. "Thanks for meeting me." There was a brief silence filled only by the sounds of the cafe. They both seemed to be searching for the right words, the tension palpable between them. Alejandro took a sip of his coffee, hoping it would somehow settle his nerves. "So, how have you been?" Laura asked, her eyes narrowing slightly as if she were assessing him. "Busy, I guess," he replied, trying to keep his tone light. "Work has been overwhelming, but I've had some time to think about everything." Laura raised an eyebrow, skepticism evident in her expression. "Thinking can be good or bad, depending on what you've been thinking about." He chuckled softly, appreciating her sharpness. "Fair enough, I've been thinking about you, about us. I regret how everything ended. I wish I could take it back." Her gaze softened momentarily, but she quickly masked it with a stoic expression. "Alejandro, you made a choice. And it wasn't just about you, it was about both of us." "I know," he said, his voice earnest, "but I didn't fully understand what I was giving up. I thought I needed to chase success, but without you it all feels hollow." Laura leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. "It's easy to realize that now, but you weren't the only one affected by your decision. I had to rebuild my life from scratch." He nodded, feeling the weight of her words. "I can only imagine how hard that must have been. I've missed you every day. I've missed us." For a moment he thought he saw a flicker of vulnerability in Laura's eyes, but it was gone as quickly as it came. "I've built a life for myself, Alejandro, and it's not just me anymore. I have the triplets to think about." The mention of the triplets sent a jolt through him. He had seen them at the charity event, but the reality of her life as a mother hit him hard now. "I know. I saw them. They're beautiful." "They are," she said, a hint of pride breaking through her guarded demeanor. "They bring me so much joy, but it's also a challenge. It's a lot of work raising 3 kids by myself." "I admire that," Alejandro said sincerely. "I can't imagine how difficult it must be." Laura's expression softened slightly, as if she was considering his words. "It's rewarding, but there are days when I feel overwhelmed and alone. I had to learn to be both mother and father to them." He felt a pang of guilt for the burden she had to carry alone. "I wish I could have been there for you. I should have been there for you." "You can't change the past, Alejandro," she replied, her voice steady but tinged with sadness. "You chose your path, and I had to choose mine." "But what if I want to be part of your life now?" he asked, his heart racing. "What if I want to be a part of their lives?" Laura looked at him intently, her eyes searching his for sincerity. "It's not that simple. Trust is hard to rebuild, especially when you've broken it once. I understand. I'm not asking for everything right away. I just want a chance to show you I've changed. I want to be there for you and the kids." A flicker of hope ignited in his chest, but he could see the wariness in her eyes. "I don't know, Alejandro. I need to think about what's best for them." "Of course," he said quickly, not wanting to push her too hard. "Take your time. I'll respect your decision." As they continued their conversation, they found themselves reminiscing about their past, their first date, the silly arguments, the dreams they had shared. The warmth of those memories wrapped around them like a comforting blanket. Alejandro could almost feel the connection they once had reigniting, but he was painfully aware of the wall Laura had built to protect herself. Laura smiled softly as she recalled a shared adventure. "Do you remember that time we got lost on our hike and ended up at that little diner in the middle of nowhere?" He chuckled, his heart swelling with nostalgia. "How could I forget? You insisted we try the pie and it was awful, but we laughed about it for hours." "Exactly. We made the best of a bad situation," she said, the laughter brightening her face. But just as quickly, the smile faded. "But things are different now. Life isn't just about us anymore." "I know," he said, his voice sincere. "But I want to be part of your journey, Laura. I want to help if you'll let me." She studied him for a long moment and he held his breath, hoping for a sign of acceptance. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I need to protect my kids, Alejandro. They're my priority. I can't let anyone hurt them." "I would never hurt them," he promised, his heart aching at the thought. "I want to support you. I want to be a good father figure if you'll allow me." Laura looked down at her hands, her expression troubled. "It's a lot to consider and I can't promise anything." "I understand," he said softly, feeling the weight of her uncertainty. "I just hope you'll give me a chance to show you I can be trusted." As the conversation continued, Alejandro felt a mix of hope and fear. He could see the flickers of their old bond, but the shadows of their past loomed large. He knew that rebuilding trust would take time, and he was willing to wait. The thought of Laura and the triplets being a part of his life filled him with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in a long time. When the coffee cups were empty and the sun began to set, casting a warm glow through the cafe windows, Alejandro realized that this meeting had been a small step towards something he desperately wanted, a chance at redemption, a chance to be part of Laura's life again. But as he looked into her eyes, he knew the road ahead would be filled with challenges. "Thank you for meeting me, Laura," he said as they stood to leave, the cafe buzzing with evening energy. "Thank you for reaching out," she replied, her tone softer now, though still cautious. "Let's take it one day at a time." "One day at a time," he echoed, a sense of determination filling him. As they walked out into the cool evening air, he felt a flicker of hope for the future, knowing that while the path ahead was uncertain, it was a path he was willing to walk, step by step, alongside Laura and their triplets. As the conversation between Alejandro and Laura deepened, a wave of emotions surged within him. They sat across from each other in the cozy cafe, the faint aroma of coffee wafting around them, mingling with the bittersweet memories of their past. Alejandro's heart raced as he leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "Laura, I can't believe you've done all this on your own. The triplets, they're beautiful." Laura's eyes sparkled with a mixture of pride and vulnerability. "They are, aren't they? They light up my life in ways I never imagined. But it hasn't been easy, Alejandro." She paused, her gaze drifting towards the window where the sun shone brightly, illuminating the bustling street outside. "I had to figure out how to raise them alone. It's been a journey." "What happened?" Alejandro asked, his curiosity piqued. He had known Laura as someone who thrived in the spotlight, yet now she radiated a quiet strength that captivated him. "How did you end up with 3 little ones?" Laura took a deep breath, her fingers nervously tracing the rim of her coffee cup. After everything fell apart, I went to that charity gala. It was a way to escape, to feel a semblance of normalcy. That's where I met someone. It was just supposed to be a one-time thing, but..." She hesitated, a shadow passing over her features. "I found out I was pregnant a few weeks later, and then, not long after, I discovered I was having triplets." Alejandro felt the ground beneath him shift. 3 children conceived in a moment of weakness after their breakup. It felt surreal, almost like a twist of fate. "You must have been overwhelmed," he said softly, trying to grasp the enormity of her situation. "I was," Laura admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "But I couldn't let them down. I had to step up and be the mother they needed. It's been challenging, but I wouldn't trade them for anything in the world." Her eyes met his, and for a moment, the air between them crackled with unspoken emotions. Alejandro leaned back, digesting her words. "I can't believe I missed out on all of this," he confessed, his voice laced with regret. "I was so blinded by my own fears that I didn't see what I was giving up. I've thought about you every day since, and now knowing you're a mother, it's incredible. But it also hurts." Laura's expression softened, and she reached across the table, her hand brushing against his. "It was a painful decision for both of us, Alejandro, but I want you to know that I never wanted to keep you out of their lives. I always hoped you would be part of it, in some way. But you left so suddenly and I had to protect my heart." "I understand," he replied, his heart aching at the thought of her struggles. "I should have fought for us, for our future. I was a coward." Laura's gaze turned serious. "It's not just about us anymore. The triplets are my priority now. I want them to know their father, but I also need you to understand that I've built a life on my own. I'm not the same person I was before." "I don't expect you to be," Alejandro said, his voice steady. "I've changed too. I've learned so much about myself since that day. I realize now that I don't just want to reclaim you. I want to be a father to our children. I want to be there for you and them. I want to be involved." Laura's eyes widened slightly. "You mean it?" "Absolutely," he replied earnestly. "I know it won't be easy, but I'm willing to take things slow. I want to earn your trust back. I want to be part of their lives, even if it takes time." A smile began to form on Laura's lips, but it was cautious. "It's a big step, Alejandro. I need to know that you're serious about this. I can't let my kids get hurt." "I promise, I'll do whatever it takes," he said, his heart pounding with determination. "I want to be there for you, for them. I want to help you in any way I can. Just give me a chance." The room fell silent for a moment, the weight of their conversation hanging between them like a delicate thread. Laura looked down at her coffee, her mind racing with possibilities. "It's not just about you being there for them," she finally said, her voice steady again. "I need to maintain my independence. I've worked hard to create a life for us, and I won't let anyone disrupt that." "Of course," Alejandro said, nodding in agreement. "I respect that. I don't want to take anything away from you. I want to add to your life, to our children's lives. I want us to be a team, not just co-parents, but a family." Laura's eyes softened and she took a deep breath. "I appreciate that, Alejandro. It means a lot, but this will take time. I need to see that you're committed, not just to me, but to the kids too." "Then let's take it one step at a time," he suggested, a glimmer of hope igniting within him. "I'd love to meet them, to spend time together as a family. Maybe we can start with a simple outing, just the 5 of us." Her smile widened, and Alejandro felt a warmth spread through him. That sounds nice, but remember, I won't tolerate any half measures. If you're in all the way. I'm all in, he affirmed, his voice firm. I want to be the father they deserve. As they shared a moment of understanding, Alejandro couldn't shake the feeling that this was the beginning of something beautiful. They had both endured pain, but now they stood on the brink of a new chapter, one filled with love, hope, and the promise of redemption. The laughter of children echoed in the background, and for the first time in a long while, Alejandro felt a sense of belonging. They finished their coffee, and as they walked out of the cafe together, Alejandro glanced at Laura, a mix of anticipation and nervousness swirling within him. They were stepping into the unknown, but he felt ready to embrace whatever came next. The path ahead might be challenging, but with Laura and the triplets by his side, he believed they could create something beautiful together. A family woven from love, understanding, and second chances.